My name is Sabine. I'm 65 years old. And this is the story of how I finally took my life back after 40 years of marriage. If you've ever felt like your family only sees you as free help, then stick around to the end. Because what I did will shock you. But it'll also give you courage. Hit the thumbs up if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own home. It was a perfectly ordinary Thursday morning in October when my life changed forever. I got up at 6 like every day, made coffee for my husband Klaus, prepared breakfast, woke our 35-year-old daughter Petra, who'd moved back in after her divorce, and made sure my 32-year-old son Michael got to work on time. Yes, you heard right. Both of our adult kids still lived with us. Not because they had to, but because it was convenient. Mom Sabine would handle everything. But that Thursday was different. Klaus sat at the breakfast table, scrolling his phone, and said without even looking at me, "Sabine, my shirt is wrinkled. Iron it real quick. Not, could you please, not, would you mind?" A command. After 40 years of marriage, he talked to me like an employee. A poorly paid one at that, since I got no salary for being housekeeper, cook, cleaner, laundry service, and family manager. Petra shuffled into the kitchen in pajamas, even though it was already 8. "Mom, where's my black skirt? You washed it." Again, no please or thank you, just entitlement. And Michael, he yelled from his room, "Mom! Make me a quick sandwich to go." As if I were his personal catering service. Share this video with someone who's felt like they're just functioning instead of living. Because what happened next changed everything. I ironed Klaus's shirt while my own coffee went cold. I searched for Petra's skirt while my breakfast sat untouched. I made Michael's sandwich while my hands shook with exhaustion. And then, when I finally had a moment to breathe, I heard them whispering in the kitchen. "She's getting weirder," Petra told her brother. Yesterday she actually asked if we could go to the movies together. Like she has nothing better to do. Michael laughed. "Yeah, and the other day she said she'd like to go dancing again. At her age. Embarrassing." Klaus chimed in. "She must have too much time. Maybe she should do more in the garden or clean the garage." My own family talked about me like I wasn't there. Like I was a piece of furniture that should do its job but please not speak or have wishes. In that moment, something in me snapped. Not dramatic, not loud. More like a quiet crack, the way an old branch gives under too much weight. But that was just the start. What happened that evening finally overflowed the barrel. I had spent the whole day cleaning, washing, cooking, organizing. My legs hurt, my back ached. But I'd made a hot dinner for everyone as always. Sauerbraten with red cabbage and dumplings, Klaus's favorite. As the family sat down, I waited for someone to praise the food, for someone to say thank you, for someone to acknowledge me at all. Instead, Klaus said, "The meat's a little tough today." Petra pushed the dumplings around. "I'm trying to lose weight, Mom. You know I don't eat carbs." And Michael? He was so deep in his phone he didn't even notice what he was eating. Then came the moment that changed everything. Klaus stood up, walked to the TV, and tossed over his shoulder. "Oh, Sabine, can you clear the table?" "Soccer's on." Not, "Let's clear up together," or "Thanks for cooking." Another command. And when I hesitated, just for a second, because I was tired too, because I wanted to sit down for once, he turned and with that condescending tone said, "What's wrong? Got something better to do?" That's when I realized, to my family I didn't exist as a person. I was a service, an appliance, something you use and forget until you need it again. If you've stayed with me this far, you already know something has to change. But what I did next even surprised me. Subscribe if you want to know how the story continues, because it gets wild. I cleared the table. silently. But as I carried plates to the kitchen, as I washed dishes, as I cleaned up, a plan took shape. A plan that would, weeks later, have my family desperately searching for me while I sat in a cozy cafe in Munich, truly happy for the first time in decades. But first I have to tell you what happened in the days after, because Klaus, Petra, and Michael had no idea they were pushing the most patient woman in Germany right to her limit. The next morning, a Friday, I woke with a strange clarity. For the first time in years, I looked at my life not through duty's filter, but with a stranger's eyes. And what I saw shocked me. I saw a 65-year-old woman who'd spent her best years caring for people who took her for granted. I saw someone who'd forgotten who she was apart from mother and wife. Klaus had already left for work without saying goodbye. Normal. Petra sat at the kitchen table complaining about her insurance job. My boss is such an idiot, Mom, and the co-workers are all jealous. I nodded and listened, like every day. But today I noticed something. Petra never asked how my day was. She never asked if I had problems or if I was happy. To her, I existed only as an echo chamber for her own worries. Michael came home around noon. He worked in a big company's IT department and had flexible hours. In practice, that meant he was often home and expected Mom to make life as easy as possible. "Mom, what's to eat?" was his first sentence. Not hi or how are you. Straight to food. "There are leftovers from the sauerbraten," I said. He grimaced. "Leftovers again? Can't you cook something fresh?" I felt that quiet crack again. Another piece of me breaking. But I cooked. Of course I cooked. Spaghetti with tomato sauce, quick and easy. While Michael ate and typed on his laptop, I asked, "Michael, remember when you were little? We used to play memory and parcheesi." He didn't even look up. He muttered. "Maybe we could have a game night again," I suggested. "With Dad and Petra. As a family." He finally looked up, not with interest or affection. Just annoyance. "Mom, I'm 32. I don't want to play memory. And I've got online raids at night." Online raids. More important than time with his mother. All day I collected these tiny stabs. Every indifferent answer. Every service taken for granted. Every missing thank you. They added up to a pain I couldn't ignore. And that evening when Klaus got home, it got worse. "Sabine?" he said, dropping into his recliner. "I'm hungry." "What's for dinner?" Same line as every day for 40 years. Same expectant tone. As if I were a restaurant and he a VIP customer. "I thought maybe we could cook together tonight," I said carefully. "Like we used to, remember? We'd experiment." Klaus looked at me like I'd suggested a trip to the moon. "Sabine, I work all day. When I get home I want to relax, not cook." "But I work all day too," I said quietly. "Here in the house, for all of you." Klaus snorted. "That's totally different. You have no stress, no deadlines, no difficult colleagues. You can plan your time however you want." I could have exploded. No stress, no deadlines? I got up at 6 every morning and never went to bed before 11. I juggled 3 adults' needs, managed the whole household, handled repairs, appointments, shopping, doctors, insurance, and got neither pay, nor thanks, nor recognition. But I didn't explode. Not yet. I cooked that night too. Cleared the table, washed, cleaned, and slipped silently into the bathroom. I sat on the tub's edge and cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just let the tears fall that had built up for years. And, sitting there, in my own bathroom, wrapped in the silence of a house where no one checked on me even though I was gone, I made a decision. One that would completely change my life. If this story has you hooked so far, wait for what comes next. What I planned and pulled off in the following days was so clever, So perfectly thought out that even I sometimes can't believe I did it. But sometimes despair leads to the smartest decisions. Saturday morning I started executing my plan. But first, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went for a walk alone. Not to shop, not to run errands. Just to walk. It was a beautiful autumn morning, leaves blazing in every color. And for the first time in ages, I actually noticed the beauty around me. As I walked through the park, I thought about my life. When did I disappear? When did I stop being Sabine and turn into just Mom and Klaus's wife? It didn't happen overnight. It crept in, step by step, year by year. Every time I put my own needs last. Every time I said, "It's fine, I'll do it." Every time I kept quiet instead of pushing back. But now it was time for change. A drastic one. When I got home, the family was in the living room in front of the TV. Klaus had opened a beer, even though it wasn't even 11. Petra was on the couch scrolling. Michael sat at his computer gaming. No one asked where I'd been. No one seemed to have noticed I was gone. "Klaus," I said, standing in front of the TV. "We need to talk." He sighed theatrically. "Sabine, sports highlights are on. Can it wait?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't." Klaus grudgingly turned the volume down. Petra and Michael kept doing their thing, but I knew they were listening. "I want a break," I said. "A few days just for me, maybe a week." Klaus stared like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. "A break? From what? You don't do anything." That answer was so typically Klaus I almost laughed. "Do nothing? I've run this household for 40 years, I said calmly. "I raised you all, cared for you, took care of everything. I think I've earned a little time off." Petra glanced up from her phone. "Mom, that's silly. You can't just leave. Who's going to handle everything?" "You're all adults," I said. "You can manage on your own for a week." Michael turned around. "But Mom, you know I can't cook. And the washing machine. How does it even work?" Klaus nodded. "Sabine, be reasonable. You know we can't function without you. And we don't have the money for that nonsense." The money argument. Though Klaus had just spent 200 euros on new fishing gear, Petra had bought shoes for 150 last week. And Michael? He blew a small fortune monthly on video games. But when Mom wanted to spend anything on herself, suddenly it was wasteful. "I don't need much," I said. "And I've saved a little." That was a lie. I hadn't saved a thing because I was never allowed to spend on myself. But they didn't need to know that. Klaus grew impatient. "Sabine, stop this nonsense. You'll stay here and do your job. Like the last 40 years. "My job? My job. As if I were his employee." "Fine," I said. "Then not." I turned and went to the kitchen. Klaus turned the volume back up. Petra buried herself in her phone. Michael faced his game. For them, the matter was closed. The little housewife rebellion had been crushed. They had no idea that was only phase 1 of my plan, the test of their reaction. And their reaction told me I was right. They took me for granted. They believed I'd always be there, no matter how badly they treated me. That was their first big mistake. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have packed your bags long ago? Or tried to change the family? I chose a different path. One that made them miss me before they even realized I was gone. Over the next 3 days I launched phase 2. I became invisible. Not physically. I was still there. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of everything. But emotionally I withdrew completely. I only spoke when spoken to. I didn't smile. I made no small talk. I was like a robot performing functions with no personality. And the most fascinating part? At first no one noticed. Klaus came home, found dinner, ate, watched TV, went to bed. Petra kept telling me about her work problems, not realizing I was only nodding, offering no advice. Michael still asked about food, not noticing I'd stopped asking about his day. Only after 3 days did Klaus get suspicious. "Sabine, is everything okay? You're so quiet." "I'm fine," I answered. "I'm doing my job." It was no accident I used the word job. The very word he'd used 3 days earlier. On Thursday, exactly a week after the Thursday it all began, I started phase 3. I got up at 6 as usual but didn't make breakfast. I brewed a cup of coffee for myself and sat at the table with a book. Klaus came into the kitchen at 6:30, stopped, and stared at the empty table. "Where's my coffee?" "In the machine," I said without looking up. "You just have to pour it." I could practically feel his confusion. For 40 years I'd set his coffee out every single morning. He grudgingly poured his own coffee. "And breakfast?" "In the kitchen," I said. "Bread's in the box. Jam in the fridge. Butter, too." Klaus stared like I'd lost my mind. "Sabine, what is this?" "I'm reading," I said simply. Petra came in and got the same surprise. "Mom, why isn't breakfast made?" "Because I'm not hungry," I replied. "You can make something yourself." Petra was offended. "But you always make breakfast." "Yes," I said, "I did. But not today." Michael was the only one who didn't react. He went to the fridge, grabbed milk and cereal, and ate in silence. At least one of my kids was self-sufficient. But the day wasn't over. I didn't cook lunch. I didn't cook dinner. When Klaus came home and asked, "What's for dinner?" I said, "I don't know. What did you have in mind?" The confusion on his face was priceless. "Sabine, quit this childishness," he said. "You know I can't cook." "You're 67, I replied calmly. "Time to learn." That night, all 3 went to bed hungry. Not because there wasn't food in the house, but because they were too proud to make anything. They waited for me to cave, for me to do what I always did, give in and take care of them. But I didn't. That was their second big mistake. They underestimated my resolve. Next morning, Friday, the situation escalated. Klaus came into the kitchen grumpy. "Sabine, what is this nonsense? Yesterday I didn't eat a hot meal. Today there's no breakfast again." "Enough!" I looked up from my book. "Klaus, I've cooked for you for 40 years. Have you ever asked if I felt like it? Ever helped me? Ever even thanked me?" "I go to work," he said defiantly. "I support the family. That's my contribution." "And what about mine?" I asked. "I work too. Every day. Morning to night. But I get no pay, no recognition, not even a thank you." Klaus raised his voice. "You're exaggerating. You have a roof, food, clothes. What more do you want?" "Respect," I said simply. "I want respect." I knew then there was no going back. Klaus stared like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe this was the real Sabine finally showing up after 40 years. "You're crazy," he said and left the kitchen. Petra and Michael slipped away too, without a word. But the real surprise came that evening. When Klaus came home from work, I wasn't there. For the first time since we married, I wasn't home when he arrived. I'd been in town, made an appointment at the bank, and asked about my financial options. It was shocking to learn how little money I had. Klaus controlled all the finances, and I got a little household allowance that barely covered groceries. When I returned at 8, all 3 sat hungry and grumpy in the living room. "Where were you?" Klaus demanded. "In town," I said. "Where in town?" "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't think it necessary," I said. "You don't tell me where you're going either." Petra jumped in. "Mom, that's different. You're the mother. You have to be here." That statement was so revealing I almost laughed. I had to be here. Not because they loved me or valued my company, but because I served a function. "I'm 65, I said. Not 95. I can absolutely go into town alone." Klaus stood. Sabine, what's gotten into you? You've acted like a stranger for a week. Maybe, I said. I am. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted anything, but because I finally felt change happening. After decades of silence, I'd found my voice. But I knew this was only the beginning. The real test was still ahead. And it came the next weekend. Klaus had invited his co-workers for a BBQ without asking me. He'd simply announced, "Saturday, Bernd, Fritz, and Werner are coming. Can you make salads and bake a cake?" Classic Klaus. He invited. I did all the work, but this time I said, no. Klaus thought he'd misheard. "What do you mean, no? I'm not baking a cake or making salads," I said. "You invited them. You take care of them." Klaus turned red with anger. "You can't just say no. What will the guys think? They'll think you're adult enough to host your own guests," I replied. Saturday, his co-workers arrived as planned. Klaus had been forced to hit the supermarket. Pre-made salads and a frozen cake. I stayed inside with a book. Through the open window, I heard Klaus explaining why it was all store-bought. "Sabine is, not feeling great today," he lied. But Bernd, always the sharp one, said, "Klaus, why don't you make a salad yourself? My wife works too, and we split housework." Fritz nodded. "Yeah, my Helga would tear my head off if I invited guests without asking." I could feel Klaus's discomfort. His co-workers asked questions he had never asked himself. Why did his wife do all the work? Why did he never ask her permission? Why did he treat her like staff? The grill party was a fiasco. The men left early, and Klaus was in a foul mood the rest of the day. "You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues," he accused. "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourself." But that still wasn't the peak of my plan. That came 2 weeks later, and what happened then was so perfect, so satisfying. I still smile when I think about it. If you want to know how I got my family to beg me on their knees to come back, stay tuned. The best part is yet to come. It was a Monday in November when I pulled off the final part of my plan. I'd been preparing for weeks, secretly researching and organizing. While my family thought I was slowly getting back to normal, I was setting up my grand entrance. That Monday I got up at 6 like always. But this time, I didn't just grab my purse. I packed a suitcase. A small, simple suitcase with everything I needed. Clothes for a week, my most important documents, and the savings book I'd secretly started. Yes, you heard that right. I had actually saved money. Not much, but enough for what I was about to do. How did I manage that? Simple. For years I'd quietly set aside small amounts while grocery shopping. €5 here, 10 there. The groceries cost more than I expected. I'd always tell Klaus, and he never questioned it. Why would he? He didn't care about the details of household spending, as long as everything ran smoothly. That indifference was now my advantage. I prepared breakfast like every Monday. For the last time, though they didn't know it. Klaus ate his bread in silence. Petra complained about work, and Michael stared at his phone. Just another normal morning at our house. No one noticed my nerves, or the suitcase I'd already hidden in the car. "I'm going shopping today," I said casually. "And then I'm visiting Aunt Gerda. She's sick and needs some help." That was only half a lie. Aunt Gerda, my only living relative, did live in Munich, and she was always happy when I came by. What my family didn't know was that I'd called her and asked if I could stay for a few days. Gerda, who'd always said Klaus treated me badly, agreed right away. Klaus nodded absently. "Yeah, do that. Tell the old lady I said hi." Petra didn't even look up. "Mom, can you pick up that fancy hand cream I like while you're out? You know, the expensive one." Even on the day I was leaving them, she was still thinking only of herself. Michael was the only one who showed a hint of interest. "Mom, how long will you be at Aunt Gerda's?" "A few days," I said vaguely. "She really needs help." "Okay," he said, turning back to his phone. "But could you cook something for the next few days before you go? You know I can't cook." There it was again. Even the thought of Mom being gone for a few days didn't spark worry or independence, just concern about who'd make dinner. "We'll see," I said, but I already knew. There'd be no pre-cooked meals. They were about to learn to fend for themselves. At 9:30, I left the house, for the last time as the old Sabine. I didn't drive to the supermarket. I drove straight onto the highway. As I headed toward Munich, I felt a mix of fear and excitement I hadn't felt in decades. With every mile I put between me and home, I felt freer. My plan was simple but effective. I would disappear. Not forever, but long enough for them to realize what they'd lost. Long enough for them to understand how much I did. And long enough for me to rediscover who Sabine really was. When she wasn't just Mom, or Klaus's wife, Aunt Gerda welcomed me with open arms. She was 72, living alone in a cozy 2-room apartment in Munich's Schwabing district, and sharper than most 50-year-olds. "Sabine, my dear," she said, hugging me tight. "Finally! I thought you'd never find the courage." We sat down with coffee and homemade cake, and I told her everything. About how my family had taken me for granted for years. About how invisible I'd felt. About the hopelessness that had built up for months. Gerda listened, nodded, and finally said, "You should have come sooner, but better late than never." "Do you think I'm crazy?" I asked. "For just running away?" Gerda laughed. "Crazy? Sabine, you're finally being sane. That family of yours has used you for decades. It's time they learn to appreciate you." That first day I just relaxed. Really relaxed. I read a book without being interrupted every 10 minutes. I drank my coffee in peace without hearing. "Mom, where's—" I looked out the window at the street, watching people pass, without mentally planning the next meal. It was wonderful. Peaceful. For the first time in decades, I was only responsible for myself. That evening, my phone rang. Klaus. I let it ring. Then came a text. "Where are you? I'm hungry." I didn't answer. An hour later, another call. I ignored it. Then a text from Petra. "Mom, where are you? I need my hand cream." And finally, Michael. "Mom, there's nothing to eat in the fridge." I put my phone on silent and enjoyed the evening with Aunt Gerda. We watched a movie, had a glass of wine, and talked about everything, except my family. The next morning I checked my phone. 23 missed calls, 31 texts. The messages had gone from confused to irritated to panicked. Klaus. "Sabine, where are you? Call me right now." Petra. "Mom, this isn't funny. I have to work, and I can't take care of the house too." Michael. "Mom, please call. We're worried. Worried. After one day. After just one single day, they finally noticed I was gone. But I didn't respond. Instead, I went for a walk with Gerda, through the beautiful streets of Schwabing, past cafes and small boutiques. She showed me her life, her favorite bakery, where she got rolls every morning, the little cafe where she played cards, the park where she took her evening walks. It was a quiet, independent life, a life where no one demanded anything from her. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you live so independently?" Gerda smiled. "Sabine, I never got married. Not because I didn't like men. I just loved my freedom more. You had your kids, your family. That was your choice. But now it's time for your second half of life. And that half belongs to you. On the third day, things got serious. Klaus didn't just call. He drove to Aunt Gerda's. But she was clever. She told him I'd been there but had already left. Where did she go? He asked, desperate. She didn't say. Gerda lied smoothly. She just said she needed time to think. I hid in the bedroom, listening as Klaus talked to her. His voice sounded different, unsure, even scared. Gerda, you have to help me. The house is chaos. Petra and Michael can't handle anything. The fridge is empty, laundry's piled up, and yesterday Michael actually went to work in dirty clothes. Oh, Gerda said innocently. And what are you doing about it? Me? I can't do everything. I work all day. Gerda gave a dry laugh. Klaus, so did Sabine. Every day. You just never noticed. After an hour, Klaus gave up and went home. But that was just the beginning. On the fourth day, Petra and Michael came with him. All three stood at Gerda's door practically begging. Aunt Gerda, please tell us where Mom is. Petra pleaded. We're sorry. We didn't know. What didn't you know? Gerda cut her off sharply. That your mother's a person? That she has feelings? That she deserves appreciation? Michael blushed. We thought she liked doing it. Oh, really? Said Gerda sarcastically. And did you ever ask her? The conversation I overheard from the bedroom was eye-opening. My family talked about me as if I were a machine that had suddenly stopped working. They didn't understand why I'd left. They didn't realize it wasn't about chores. It was about respect. But slowly it began to dawn on them. Klaus told Gerda about the past few weeks. How I'd stopped cooking. How I'd stopped doing everything automatically. She was so different, he said helplessly, like I didn't know her anymore. Maybe, Gerda said. You never really did. Maybe you only knew the role she played. That's when I knew my plan was working. They were starting to understand. Not completely. Not yet. But it was a start. Share this video if you've ever felt taken for granted by your family. Because what happened next proves it's worth standing up for your own worth. On the 5th day of my escape, something unexpected happened. I was having breakfast with Gerda when my phone rang. But this time it wasn't Klaus or one of my kids. It was Mrs. Weber, our neighbor. Sabine, she said worriedly. Is everything okay? I've heard strange noises from your house the past few days. And last night Klaus set off the smoke alarm. The whole street could smell it. I could picture it perfectly. Klaus trying to cook, nearly burning the house down. I'm fine, Mrs. Weber, I said. I'm just away for a few days. Oh, good, she said, relieved. I thought something had happened. After hanging up, I couldn't help laughing. The image of Klaus panicking over a burning schnitzel was too funny. Gerda chuckled too. See? She said. They're already learning. By the 6th day, everything went quiet. No calls, no texts. At first it worried me. Had they given up? Had they decided they could manage without me? But Gerda calmed me. They're thinking, she said. Thinking about what they did wrong. And she was right. On the 7th day, exactly 1 week after I'd left, the letter came. Klaus had written me a real handwritten letter. When was the last time he'd done that? Probably our first anniversary. Dear Sabine, it began. I don't know where you are, but I hope this letter reaches you. I've been thinking a lot these past days. About us, our marriage, how I've treated you. I think I was blind. Blind to what you did every day. Blind to your needs. Blind to the woman I married 40 years ago. The letter was long. 3 handwritten pages. Klaus wrote about the chaos at home, his helplessness in the kitchen. The realization of how much work the household really was. But the most important part came at the end. I miss you, Sabine. Not just your work, but you. Your laughter, your stories, your way of caring about everything. I know now you weren't my employee. You were my partner, and I treated you badly. It wasn't a perfect letter. Not perfect words, but they were honest. And for the first time in years, I felt Klaus actually saw me. Not the role I played, but me. On the 8th day, I decided to go home. Not because I'd caved, but because I sensed something had truly changed, and because I was curious what awaited me. The drive home felt strange. I'd been gone just a week, but it felt like years. I wasn't the same Sabine who'd left. I'd remembered who I was when I wasn't constantly taking care of others. As I turned onto our street, I could already see something was off. Our front yard, usually immaculate, looked like a battlefield. Trash bins still stood out from last Tuesday, and the curtains I'd hung a week ago were crooked, like someone had tugged them down. I parked and went to the front door. It was unlocked. Unusual, since Klaus always locked everything. When I stepped inside, a strange smell hit me. A mix of burnt food, dirty laundry, and was that smoke alarm spray? "Hello," I called out. The response came instantly, from all directions. Klaus rushed from the living room, Petra ran downstairs, and Michael came from the kitchen. They looked like they'd just survived a week in the jungle. Klaus had a ketchup stain on his shirt, apparently the same one he'd worn for days. Petra looked like she hadn't brushed her hair in 3 days. And Michael was wearing dirty clothes. Even from 2 meters away I could smell him. "Sabine!" They all shouted at once, but instead of hugging me or scolding me, they froze, as if they weren't sure how to react. Klaus was the first to move. He walked toward me slowly, and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears? The last time Klaus had cried was 15 years ago when his father died. "Sabine?" he said softly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Petra started crying too. "Mom, we messed up big time. We didn't appreciate you. We treated you like a machine." Michael nodded silently. He couldn't even speak. I stood there in my own hallway looking at my family. They didn't just look exhausted. They looked humbled. 1 week without me had taught them more than 40 years of living with me. "I want to show you the house," Klaus said suddenly, "so you can see what we've done without you." It sounded like a confession, and it was. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Dirty pots and pans everywhere. The stove was black with soot. Apparently something had burned. The fridge was nearly empty, and what remained was clearly spoiled. Pizza boxes and fast food wrappers covered the counters. "We tried to cook," Klaus said quietly, "but we didn't know how. On the 2nd day I burned a schnitzel, and the smoke alarm went off. On the 4th day Michael tried to boil pasta, and burned it." "You can burn pasta?" I asked in disbelief. "If you forget to add water," Michael muttered, ashamed. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes, empty glasses, dishes, newspapers, remote controls. Everywhere. The coffee table was covered in crumbs and sticky stains. "We tried cleaning," Petra said, "but we didn't know where to start." "And we didn't even know where the cleaning supplies are," Michael added. They didn't know where the cleaning stuff was. After 32 years in this house, my son didn't know where the vacuum was. The bathroom was a nightmare. Towels gray with dirt. The toilet, well, best not described. And in the laundry room, dirty clothes piled like little mountains. We tried doing laundry, Petra said sheepishly. But we didn't know which setting to use, or how much detergent. The first time, half the kitchen flooded with foam. I had to laugh. I couldn't help it. The image of 3 grown adults staring helplessly at a washing machine like it was a spaceship was too absurd. "You're truly helpless," I said. But my voice wasn't cruel. It was gentle. "Yes," Klaus said seriously. "We are. Without you, we're completely lost. And that's not right. It's not fair to you." He sat down on the crumb-covered couch. "Sabine, it took me 67 years to realize what you do every day. I'm ashamed." Petra sat beside him. "Mom, I had no idea how much work running a household is. I thought it just kinda happened. But it's a full-time job, and you did it for 40 years without complaining." "I did complain," I said softly. "You just didn't listen." That hit hard. Michael, who'd been silent until then, sat down too. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm 32 and didn't even know how to boil an egg. That's not just embarrassing. It's shameful." I looked at them. My family, sitting there like 3 children who'd done something wrong. But they weren't kids anymore. They were adults finally seeing what they'd ignored for decades. "So," I asked, "what now?" Klaus took my hand. His was rough, trembling slightly. "We want you to come home. Really come home. But not as our servant, as our partner, as our mother, as someone who deserves respect." "And what exactly changes?" I asked. I didn't want just words. I wanted action. Klaus pulled a note from his pocket. "I made a list," he said. "A list of everything that needs to change." The list was impressive. Klaus had written down who'd handle what. Petra would wash her own clothes and clean her room. Michael would cook twice a week and take out the trash. Klaus himself would do the shopping and help clean on weekends. "And the finances?" I asked. Klaus blushed. "You'll have your own account. Your own money just for you. Not much, but enough to be independent." That was more than I expected. "And what about my own wishes?" I asked. "My hobbies? My interest?" Petra looked puzzled. "Mom, what hobbies do you have? I mean, besides housework?" It was a sad question. Proof of how little they knew me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'll have to find out again." "Then we'll find out together," said Klaus. "We've spent 40 years taking. Now it's time to give." It was a start. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive and forget. "I'll come back," I said finally, "but with conditions." My conditions were simple, but non-negotiable. Everyone does their own laundry. Everyone clears their own dishes. We take turns cooking, including Klaus. And once a week we have a family night. No TV, no phones? Just us. And if someone doesn't stick to it, Klaus asked. "Then I leave again," I said. But this time for good. Change didn't happen overnight. At first there were plenty of slip-ups. Klaus forgot to clear his dishes. Petra left her laundry lying around, and Michael slipped back into letting me cook. But every time it happened, I pointed to our agreement. And every time, they apologized and corrected course. After a month, a new rhythm began to form. Klaus discovered that grocery shopping can actually be fun when you're not in a rush. Petra realized she could, in fact, cook. She'd just never tried. And Michael? He became a bona fide pasta expert. Most importantly, they started seeing me as a person. Klaus asked how my day was. Petra didn't just talk about her problems. She listened to mine. And Michael began telling me stories from work instead of eating in silence. 6 months later, I signed up for a pottery class. The first thing in decades I'd done just for me. Klaus drove me there and picked me up, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. How was it? He'd ask, and he truly listened to the answer. Petra found her own apartment and moved out. Not in anger, but because she finally wanted to stand on her own feet. "Mom," she said the day she left, "thank you for showing me how important it is to stand up for yourself." Those might be the kindest words she's ever said to me. Michael still lives at home, but he's a different man. He cooks, cleans his room, and sometimes, entirely on his own, helps me in the garden. "Mom," he told me recently, "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand who you are." And Klaus? He's become the man I fell in love with 40 years ago. Attentive, grateful, interested in what I think and feel. Last night he said, "Sabine, I'm proud of you. Proud you read us the riot act. Proud you fought for yourself and for our family." Today, a year after my disappearance, I'm telling you this story, not because I wanted revenge, but to give others courage. Courage to set boundaries, to say no, to leave if you must. My family learned to value me. But most of all, I learned to value myself. I'm not just Klaus's wife or Petra and Michael's mother. I'm Sabine, a person with her own wishes, dreams, and needs. And that is more than okay. If you've listened this far, you're probably someone who gives too much and takes too little. Someone who forgot herself while caring for others. Hear me, you matter. You deserve respect. You deserve gratitude. And if you're not getting that, it's time for a change. Sometimes you have to disappear, so they finally see you. And sometimes you have to disappear, to find yourself again.